feature is as myself will work through and relay the questions back to the presenters. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce and welcome you to our elementary session, Help Your Students Bloom with Spring with Chris Wyant. Chris is an educational manager at Illinois Ag in the Classroom. Prior to joining Illinois Ag in the Classroom in January 2020, Chris was a high school English teacher for 14 years. He also helps his wife run their small specialty crop farm, which grows primarily cut flowers and microgreens. And now I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris.
All right. Thank you very much, Michelle. I appreciate it. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here today and excited to share with you some elementary themed lessons that go along with some spring things as well here. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I have a lot of classroom time. I spent mostly in high school classroom, but I'm able in this position to bring my passions of education and agriculture together in some pretty exciting ways. And so I farm differently than when you think about Illinois agriculture. The average size farm in Illinois is about 375 acres. And so my little flower farm that my wife and I run is about a half acre. And it's my wife's full-time job is managing that half acre farm. And so a lot of the things that I like to kind of highlight is the diversity of agriculture, even in a state like Illinois, where it's primarily dominated by production of corn and soybeans. There's a lot of other things going on. And when we think about nationally, there's just a wealth of different ways that people are finding ways to farm and finding ways to make a living off the land. And so we've got some lessons today that highlight some of those things, as well as some spring themed activities here as well. So if you like, as you go through here, feel free to drop anything in the Q&A and I can answer it, or we got some other people that can help answer that stuff as well. So I'm going to start with the lesson here today called Slice of Soil. This is a great one to help students better understand the amount of land that we have available to produce all the crops that we need to be able to survive. And so in a state like Illinois, about 74% of our state is the land in our state is used directly for production agriculture. But when you think worldwide, that really is not the case. And we're really fortunate here in Illinois to have some of the best soil in the entire world, but that's not the case everywhere. So if we take an apple and we pretend like an apple is the world, if we think about, and we can talk to students about what is the percentage of the Earth's surface that's covered by water, the answer is about 75%. So I've already quartered this apple. So I'm going to take 3 of the 4 quarters and set those aside, because even though we do have some food that comes from the ocean, right? We eat seafood, and there's other efforts being done to do different types of farming in the ocean. For all intents and purposes, we're not using that as agricultural land. So we have 25% of the Earth's surface is available for us to grow on. So I've got a cutting board and a knife here in front of me. So I'm going to cut that 25% piece into 3 slices. So if I take one of those slices, is land that is already developed. So it's housing developments, it's parking lots, it's shopping malls, it's all these different things that we have that allow us to have all the things we enjoy in society. We're not using that land anymore for production agriculture typically. I've got another piece that is land that's either too high or too low or too rocky or too much desert conditions, too rainy, too swampy, those kinds of things. So it's inhospitable land that we're not using for agriculture. So I got this little sliver left here, and I'm going to cut it into 4ths. And this is the land that we are able to utilize to produce food. And so 3 of those 4 little slivers that I cut are used directly for either grazing livestock or producing feed for livestock. So like much of the agricultural land here in Illinois is used for this purpose. And this last little piece here, this is what is available to grow food that humans eat directly. So it's a really, really small piece of the Earth's surface, and it continues to get smaller and smaller for all of these purposes. Every time we continue to develop more land and use it for other purposes, we have less land in order to grow food and feed on. And so this is one of the things I like to talk to students about, is this idea that farmers have this burden and this responsibility to continue to try to grow more with less in ways that are sustainable. And so that opens up a lot of really interesting conversations. The other cool thing you can do with this is when you think about most of what we consume is grown in the top 6 to 12 inches of topsoil. So if I peel that apple, that's really what I'm looking at is that little sliver of soil is what's allowing us to grow the food that we eat directly. So another version of this lesson is on the National Ag in the Classroom Matrix. I took this slide from their presentation. It kind of maps that out for you and kind of shows you how all that breaks down. So typically pretty eye-opening for students to see that. They don't really think about the amount of land or the little land that we actually do have in the grand scheme of things to grow all the food that we need for the ever-expanding billions and billions of people here on Earth. And so typically pretty eye-opening things. I oftentimes too try to cut it so that the piece that's left is the sticker of the apple, because it's roughly the same size. So that's kind of a cool visual for students to see. When they take a sticker off the apple, they can kind of visualize that size. So that's a slice of soil. We want to talk a little bit more about soil. We've got a great lesson that's called Soil Your Undies. And so I have a third grader at home, so I can tell you without a doubt that this is funny. Kids think this is funny, this concept of soiling your undies. And so essentially what we're doing is trying to teach students about what happens with healthy soil. How do things decompose in soil that's healthy? And do things decompose more slowly in soil that's not as healthy? And so what we do is we give away a lot of cotton underwear to people. So this is a brand new pair of Hanes boys underwear. It's cotton except for the elastic band on it. And what we did last year was we buried 6 pairs of this underwear around a pollinator plot at our campus here in Bloomington, Illinois. And so we buried it on July 29th. And we wanted to see, well, how healthy is the soil? How quickly will these cotton underwear decompose under the soil? So we came back at the beginning of October. So again, buried it one of the last days of July, came back beginning of October and dug up the first pair. And you can see it looked like this after just a couple months. So we were pretty impressed with that. We thought that was pretty cool how quickly that was decomposing under the soil. And our theory was that it was, October, it was starting to get colder here in Illinois. So we thought those soil microorganisms are going to start slowing down. And when we come back a month later, we're really not going to see any difference, that it's going to have stopped decomposing. So we came back the beginning of November, so exactly 1 month later, and I'm digging and digging and digging. I can't find anything, thinking we misplaced the flag where we showed where we buried it, and then finally realized that I'd already dug up this. So the only thing that was left by November was just the elastic, which is synthetic materials. They're not going to decompose like the cotton does. So it was really cool for us, even though we kind of knew what to expect, to be able to see that idea of, even when we think the soil is asleep and the soil is not doing anything, there's still some pretty amazing things going on under the surface. So with students, one of the things you could do is bury it at the beginning of the school year and pick specific dates throughout the school year to go out and uncover that underwear that you've buried to see how it's decomposing. Another way to do it is to bury the soil in bury the underwear in different types of soil. So maybe right next to the school building is a lot of clay and backfill, so it's not maybe as healthy of soil. Maybe the playground's really great soil, but maybe there's a farm locally that has really healthy soil, or they think they have really healthy soil, and you could bury a pair there. And then if you dig all the pairs up at the same time, you can see the differences in how those different things are decomposing. So a really cool, fun, a little bit silly way to kind of introduce students to the idea of all the things happening under the soil that allow that organic matter to decompose and then turn around and become, healthier soil that we can grow food on eventually as well. If you're interested to, the St. Louis Science Center has a whole webpage devoted to this. It's called Soil Your Undies. And so if you're interested in some more resources with that, if you want to Google St. Louis Science Center, you can see more resources there as well. We often talk a lot, especially in the spring, with Earth Day coming up, we talk a lot about conservation efforts and the importance of making sure that we're doing things sustainably, both in agriculture, but also in our lives as well. And so this is a really cool way for younger students to kind of start to better understand how all these different systems in Earth are interconnected. So this is our Circle of Earth bracelet. You can see there on the side, I've got some books that pair really well with this. And so I've got, typically when we do these presentations, we pre-bag everything up. And so I've got a pipe cleaner and a few beads in here. So I'm just going to pour those out on my desk here. And so this is a great way to kind of introduce a number of different concepts. So we start with the blue bead, because as we already said, 75% or 3/4 of the Earth's surface is covered in water. All right, so we put that blue bead on there. For older students, if you wanted to introduce some fractions, you could do 3 blue beads, right? And then we have 1 brown bead for the land, right? So on this land, we're going to grow food. And so I have a green bead that represents the food. So we grow food both for us to eat, as well as food that we can feed to animals. And then they eat that, consume that, and are turned into additional food for us as well. So again, there's lots of ways to do this. You could have different beads representing animals and those kind of things as well. So we grow plants. So everything starts with plants and growing those plants. And in order for that to happen, we need a few things to fall into place. And so one of those things is we need the sun. All right. And so I've got a yellow bead to represent the sun. And again, depending on the age of the students, we're barely introducing concepts of photosynthesis here. And so depending on that skill level, you could add additional beads and make this, more of a photosynthesis type bracelet as well, depending on the age group there. So we've got the sun. The sun provides light we need for photosynthesis. It also provides warmth as well, right? It's really sunny here in Illinois today, but it's like 30 degrees out there, right? So no matter how sunny it is, things are not going to start growing again around here. So I've got an orange bead that represents day length. And we've got a black bead that represents nighttime. So plants need a rest too. They need time down just like people do, right? And then I've also got a white bead here, and that represents the wind. So the wind moves weather patterns. It brings in pests and diseases as well. So there's all sorts of different things that we need the wind in the air to do. We can also connect that concept to photosynthesis as well. So I've got a clear bead left, and so I'm going to put that down just a couple inches on the bracelet, and I'm going to put the other end of the bracelet through that, and it makes it adjustable. So as Michelle said, I'm a former high school English teacher. I'm a sucker for a good metaphor. And so this clear bead represents us, mankind, humanity, and everything hinges, see the metaphor there? Everything hinges on our ability to take care of all these resources. And so how well we are stewards of the earth, that's what the success and the future of the earth depends on, right? Is on us. And so makes it into an adjustable bracelet, but also gives students this kind of nice idea that they're part of the solution as well, and they can be part of that, of taking care of the earth as well. So again, really good activity for younger elementary students. It'd be a great one if you have older elementary students. Again, if you're talking about photosynthesis and some of those more advanced concepts, you could teach them those, and they could go to a younger classroom and do a simpler version and kind of reinforce some of those concepts with a younger audience as well. So again, that's our Circle of Earth bracelet. Springtime's time for us to start talking about planting things as well. And so it's pretty amazing. A lot of students have never grown anything, right? That concept of being able of growing a plant is kind of foreign to them. And so we've got this lesson, Beanie Baby. This is kind of Ag in the Classroom 101 here. This lesson's been around a long time, but it's a really cool way to show students what a seed needs to germinate. And so here in Illinois, we go to a lot of college campuses and work with pre-service teachers so that they know what we're about, know what we can offer them before they even get into the classroom. And it's always amazing going in and talking to these 20, 21-year-old students. And I ask them, what does a seed need to germinate? And a lot of them don't necessarily know the answer. And they make some guesses, and they usually get something right. But there's a lot of confusion about what a seed really does need to germinate. And so typically a lot of people say, well, it needs the soil. Well, not really, right? If you've ever got some seeds to germinate on a wet paper towel on your countertop, right? They don't need soil to germinate. Eventually, they're going to need some soil or something to hold those roots into place. But to germinate, they don't really need soil. Oftentimes people say, well, it needs the light. And we go back to what I was just talking about with that Circle of Earth bracelet. We have a lot of light here today, but it's too cold, right? So we need the light from the sun, but more so to get a seed to germinate, we need the warmth from the sun. That's what's really going to help that seed to germinate and to grow. And then usually people can figure out that it needs some moisture, it needs some water in there as well, all right? And so I've got a little jewelry bag here. We get these with a hole punched above the seal already. You can punch the hole yourself, but it is important to make sure that hole is above the seal. And then I've got, this is a white powdery substance. It's called Soil Moist. And you can get this in garden nursery centers. It used to be kind of popular years ago in floral arrangements. They put it in the bottom of a vase. And so the cool thing about this is it soaks up about 100 times its weight in water. So it's cornstarch based. And it actually is a very similar formulation to what's used in diapers as well. So something that some students might be familiar with, having younger siblings at home still in diapers. And so we use soybeans. So I've got some soybeans here in front of me. So I'm going to put a couple soybeans in here as well. And so soybeans work really well for this activity because they do germinate pretty quickly. And they also are a large seed. And so as that seed starts to germinate, students can actually see the different plant parts with the naked eye. So it doesn't require a microscope or anything like that. So I forgot to bring water in here with me, but you're going to fill this bag up about half full of water as well. And what you'll find with this soil moist is that water is going to quickly get absorbed by that soil moist there, and there's not going to be any water to leak out. It's just going to be this big moist kind of blob in there. And so then we've got this hole through the top. So we're going to take our yarn and we're going to tie it into a necklace. And so we've got the moisture in there, right, that those seeds need and able to germinate. But then we talk to students about what is the seed, how are we going to get warmth for that seed to grow? And so, you know, students might have a lot of ideas. We could put it next to the heating vent. We could tape it to the window. Lots of different ways we could do that. But this is called Beanie Baby, right? And so we want to use our own body heat. And I can tell you, I have a sweaty third grader at home, and nothing's warmer than him after an hour of PE, right? So if students just take that Beanie Baby and put it in their shirt, their own body heat is going to be enough to be able to germinate those seeds. So if a teacher did this at the beginning of the school day, by the end of the school day, in most cases, that seed would be swelled up to about twice as big, might be starting to split open. And then typically by the next day, you're going to start to see some of those seed parts, those plant parts coming out of that seed. So really cool process, really neat for students to see that they're able to use their body heat to get a seed to germinate. We also have labels that we make that say, I'm germinating, ask me how. And so students can put those on and wear those around. And again, stimulate some of those hallway conversations to get them talking about what they're learning about and kind of learning it better that way as well. I've got a couple books on my slide here. One I do want to point out is one of our favorite authors, Peggy Thomas, is Full of Beans. Henry Ford Grows a Car. A great soybean book. It's about World War II era or pre-World War II era. Henry Ford was doing experiments with soybean-based plastic as well as soybean-based biofuels as well. And so he actually made a car out of soybean plastic. There's a video of him hitting it with an axe, showing how strong it is. And then World War II came and production switched to wartime production, and they basically left that behind and forgot about it. So it's a really cool book to talk about how some of these technologies and these more sustainable practices have been around for a long time. It's just taken us a long time to fully implement them. So really, really great ag book. It has a lot of great back matter in it as well. And it's an excellent one to add to your elementary classroom as well. Another one we like to do this time of year is what's called our throw and grow. And so you may have heard these called seed bombs before. We prefer the term throw and grow for schools. And so basically this lesson is meant to show students how they can be a part of helping to provide resources, habitat for pollinators throughout the growing season. So again, on the slide here, I've got some really great books to point out. One of my favorite pollinator books is Honeybee by Illinois author Jeri Fleming. It's a beautiful book. It's a large book. It's really great for read alouds, and probably the most accurate honeybee book that I've ever seen. It really goes into a lot of detail, but makes it accessible for a younger audience. So if you're looking for a new pollinator book this year, I can highly recommend Honeybee. The other two next to it there, Flowers Are Calling and Flower Talk, are both really good as well. They talk about different things flowers have evolved to do to attract pollinators to help them be able to reproduce as well. And so there's some really cool stuff with color and petal shape and all those kind of things in those books as well. So our throw and grow lesson, the idea is that students are going to get an idea of how they can help contribute to increasing pollinator habitat. And again, if we want to pull in agriculture, this is something that farmers are continuing to do more with and better understand. And so in Illinois, we have some projects trying to increase milkweed habitat because we're part of the monarch butterfly migration. And so there's lots of efforts by environmental groups as well as farmers and farmer-led organizations trying to increase that habitat. So it's something that farmers are doing and something the rest of us can try to do as well. So I've got this is just air dry clay. Any type of clay would work. This is pretty readily available. So I've got just a disc of it that I pulled out. And then in front of me, I got some native wildflower seeds, and then I've got just a little bit of potting soil here as well. So if I take that moist clay and I just press my wildflower seeds into it, you can see they're sticking to the clay there. So that's going to hold all that together. And then if I take my potting soil and roll the whole thing around in potting soil, that clay is going to stick everything together. And the idea is, you can see it here, that I can let that dry a little bit, and those seeds there have everything they need in order to grow, right? They've got some moisture from the clay. The clay is also holding it together. They've got some soil around it. So it's called throw and grow because the idea is that students can make these and they can literally, as they're driving home with their parents and they drive by an unmowed ditch somewhere, or a vacant lot or something like that, they could literally chuck it out the window, right? Or as they're walking home, do the same thing. And in any unmowed area, those plants are going to be able to start growing and provide additional habitat for pollinators. And so a really cool way to give students kind of some agency and help them realize they can be part of that as well. Again, a good opportunity to talk about how plants grow and those kind of things as well. So that's Throw and Grow. That's a really simple, easy one to do, and a great way to talk about different types of flowers and the difference between native and non-native, and also a good chance to talk about different types of pollinators there too. All right, so that's Throw and Grow. All right, I've got another one here that's related to growing seeds, and this is one that we came up with more recently. And so this is do-it-yourself seed tape. So if any of you are gardeners, you may have seen, you can buy at garden centers. Typically it's small seeds, like say carrots, and it comes on this tape. If I unrolled this, this is like a big sheet of tape, and you can see it's got seeds embedded in it. So the idea with seed tape is that it makes it easier for gardeners if they're trying to plant really, really tiny seeds that need precise spacing. They can pay a little more money and get it on this, just dig their furrow with their hoe, lay the seed tape down, and then cover it up, and then the paper will all disintegrate, and then the seeds will be perfectly spaced. So it's not something that's used in commercial agriculture very much. It's more of a gardening type thing. But it's a cool opportunity to bring some math and science concepts in for students. And so it requires really cheap one-ply toilet paper. I spent 14 years in a high school. I can assure you that there's a lot of really cheap toilet paper in our school system. So we have access to that pretty easily. And so the idea is that students are going to do some math here. So they're going to measure out a certain length of their one-ply toilet paper. So say I'm going to do 16 inches here, let's say. And I like to use radish seeds for this. I think a lot of times, you know, school garden programs, at least in the part of the country that I'm in, a lot of the garden crops that grow are going to grow throughout the summer. So students aren't going to be able to really have access to a school garden at the time when they're actually in school. So when I talk about kind of some school gardening efforts, again, at least in the part of the country I'm in, I like to think about really short season crops and crops that grow well in spring and fall, because they're crops that students can actually see growing all the way to the harvest point while they're actually in school. So radishes are like a 20-day crop, and so they're an excellent one to use in, say, March, and students would be able to completely grow a radish crop before the school year is over. So if I've got my toilet paper, I'm going to lay a ruler down in front of it, and then we're going to talk to students about seed spacing and how we need certain spacing within a row to allow plants to grow. So they're going to have to do a little research, learn about the correct spacing for radishes. So let's say it's 2 inches. This is the correct spacing for radishes. So they'd have their ruler down next to their seed tape. They're going to take a spray bottle and spray it down. And then they're going to measure out their seeds on that toilet paper at the correct spacing. Then what they would do is fold it over a couple times to make basically like a pocket. And they might have to re-moisten the toilet paper a little bit, but if they press it down, this paper is so flimsy that those seeds are going to get pressed into that paper. And then you allow it to dry, and they can literally just roll it up, and the seeds are going to stay embedded in that paper, and they can take it home and plant it. Or if you have a school garden, they could plant it in their garden and see how well they did with their spacing. So you can see in our lesson that's available on our website, agintheclassroom.org, you can see we've got a whole grid lesson with math to figure out how many rows could we fit in this certain size garden and how many plants could grow in each row. And so they do some math conversions to figure out the area of their garden and how many plants will grow in that area. I like this lesson too because it's a cool way, again, kind of a nice metaphor for students. So the conventional wisdom for how to grow radishes, that you put them in a row and you plant them, say, 2 inches apart. And that's just how you do it. That's the right way to grow radish. Well, I'm a specialty crop grower, very small scale, hand scale labor we do on my farm. And so we're always thinking about ways to be more efficient. And if there's ways we can do things differently, then what's the conventional wisdom? And so one thing I know some specialty crop growers do, let's say like the farmer's market scale, is for radishes, instead of planting them in a row, they would plant them in clumps. So they would plant, say, 5 or 6 radishes all right together, and then skip a foot, 5 or 6 radishes, skip a foot, etc. So they're only having to weed around the clumps. So it's a little time savings there. But then also the big time savings is when those radishes have grown, it's the same number of radishes per foot. Some of them are just closer together, and they grow out from each other. And then when they're harvesting, they grab the entire clump, pull it up, put the rubber band around it, wash it off, and it's ready to go for the farmer's market. So it makes harvesting way easier, and they grow the same way. I've done the same thing with onions. It absolutely works. And so it's a cool metaphor for students to think about, and teachers as well, that, you know, just because things are supposed to grow in a certain way, or just because students are supposed to learn in this way, there's lots of ways to be successful with that, right? There's lots of ways that students can grow and be successful in our classrooms. And so this is kind of a cool way to introduce some of that kind of social, emotional kind of learning in the classrooms as well, while also getting some math skills in there as well, and learning a little bit more about how plants grow. So that's our do-it-yourself seed tape activity. I'm an English guy, and so if I can throw in a little poetry anywhere, I'm going to do it. And so I found this book a couple of years ago. It's called Ode to an Onion. It's by Alexandria Giardino. And there's in real life, there's a Chilean poet. His name was Pablo Neruda, very, very famous poet around the world. And at one point in his career, he decided he wanted to write odes to everyday objects. So an ode is, it's historically speaking, it's originated in ancient Greece. It's typically performed orally in public, praising a person, typically. So he said, well, I'm going to write odes to everyday normal objects. And many of his odes are to agricultural products. He has an ode to corn, an ode to salt, and then one of his poems is an ode to an onion. So this story is a children's book that is the fictional version of how he got the idea to write his Ode to an Onion poem. It's a cool book too. It has actual onion skin paper at the beginning and end. And then the back of it, it has his actual poem, both in English and in Spanish. So it's kind of cool to bring that literary text in there as well. So when I found that book, I thought, well, how could we take that idea and get students to write some poetry as well, and kind of do some more work learning more about some of these different fruits and vegetables that they're maybe familiar with or not familiar with. And so you can see I have a couple examples from the lesson. I think there's 6 different poetic forms that we have in the lesson. And so this first one is what's called an acrostic poem. So you can see the letters, the first letter of each line spells what the poem's about. So you can see this is my acrostic poem here about carrots. I also have a below there, it's basically a poem to introduce the idea of metaphor to students. And so I have a poem about zucchini, what it looks like, sounds like, smells like, tastes like, and feels like. So they create metaphors to express that. When I go and present to teachers, typically we write haikus, and I have them pick their favorite or least favorite fruit or vegetable, and they write a haiku about it because it's a really quick, easy way to do that. The cool thing about bringing this type of activity into your classroom is it's a really great way to sneak in some research, right? If I was going to ask students to, hey, go research green beans and write me a half-page paragraph about green beans, there's going to be a whole lot of eye rolling. But if we can get them to do that same level of research and have them write about it in a fun, creative way, we might get a little bit less of that eye rolling, right? So in order for them to say, write this acrostic poem about carrots, they're going to have to do some research about carrots and learn about what kind of plant they are, how they grow, right? All those sorts of things to allow them to write that poem effectively. And so we can get them to develop some of those research concepts while they're also learning about foods that they hopefully should know about and hopefully will want to try to eat, but we're also getting them to write about it in a creative way. So we can accomplish a lot of different things by kind of slightly tweaking how we ask students to read and write about things in our classroom. So I really like this one. Again, it's called Ode to a Vegetable, and that full lesson plan is available on our website as well. If I kind of zip back over to talking about pollinators a little bit, I didn't mention earlier, I'm an amateur beekeeper. Amateur is the key word. I'm an okay beekeeper. I've not had as much success as I'd like. As my wife can attest to, it's a very expensive hobby, and one that when you make a mistake, it's an expensive mistake to fix. And so bees continue to get more and more expensive each year. And so it's fascinating, it's amazing, but it would be easier to just throw the money away and not mess with it. But I'm really passionate about pollinators. I like the idea of kind of learning more about them and kind of being a part of that, and not only producing honey, which is obviously a nice trade-off, but also allowing habitat to be out there more and allowing bees to prosper more. So one of the, honeybees are one of the bees that get probably the most attention because we use them for a food product, right? We use them to create honey, and they're really important pollinators for a number of major agricultural crops. But when we think about conservation efforts, honeybees are not a natural, they're not a native species to the United States. And so when we think about conservation, we're really not talking about honeybees. We can talk about ways to help hives last longer and survive and those kind of things, but conservation efforts are really focused on native pollinators. And there is so much we don't know about native pollinators. We interviewed a researcher at Southern Illinois University a couple of years ago, and she was doing research down very far Southern Illinois. and they were trying to get a census of the native pollinators in their area, and they discovered multiple pollinator species that they didn't even, that as far as they can tell, were not known to science before they found them in Southern Illinois. So lots of things that we still need to learn about native pollinators, and definitely worthy of some attention. And so just like that throw and grow activity earlier is meant to provide nectar and pollen sources for bees, making bee hotels is a way to provide habitat for them. So for instance, in my honeybee hives, my queen can lay up to 2,000 eggs every single day, right? So in the peak season in a honeybee hive, there's maybe 80,000 bees or more. Conversely, for something like a bumblebee, say, they're going to lay about 30 eggs in their lifetime. And so they're going to find hollow sticks. These are actually cardboard tubes that are specifically meant to create these bee hotels. And so they're going to burrow in there, and they're going to lay an egg and put some feed in it. And then they're going to cap it off and lay another egg and put some feed and cap it off. And they're going to fill up a couple of these tubes. And then once they've done laying their eggs for the year, they die. And so the next generation of bees relies on this habitat in order to be able to hatch out later the next year and be able to have bees again. So again, when we think conservation speaking, it's really, really important that they have that habitat to be able to do that. So again, this is a really fun activity for students to make a craft, but they can also learn a lot about pollinators as well. So this is just made with a aluminum can. You can see I do have some of those bee tubes in there. I've got some pine cones and sticks shoved in there as well. You can also use, they sell these little bamboo ones. So depending on the different type of native pollinator, they require different size tubes. And so there's lots of different things that you can buy online to be able to create these in your classroom. And it's not terribly expensive. I will say year to year, after a year or two, you are going to want to replace the tubes. They can harbor disease from year to year. And so if you truly want to give them good habitat, you do want to replace those and make sure that you're not spreading disease within those populations as well. Last thing I'll show you that's pollinator related, just because I just got it and I think it's super cool. See if I can show it to you here. It is a reproduction of a honeybee hive that's 3D printed. And so really cool, has every single detail honeybee hive, including all the little frames that you can pull out. So really, really great visual for students to kind of see. And so my understanding is if you've got 3D printers at your school, these plans are available for free online. And so you are able to replicate it yourself as well. But really cool visual to show students how honeybees live in man-made hives, different than say how native pollinators would live elsewhere. All right, so that's my pollinator related stuff. Again, fits really well in spring here. I think most beekeepers are getting up and moving and going to be starting to work with their bees here in the next month or so, at least here in Illinois. Next, I'll talk a little bit about vermicomposting. You know, when we talk about planting seeds in the spring, we need healthy soil to allow those seeds to grow and do well. And so one of the experiments I've done the last couple of years is some work with vermicomposting or composting with worms. So we've got plans that you can just buy regular old Rubbermaid totes, and you drill some holes in them and add some worms, and it's pretty amazing what these worms are able to do to decompose things in a really short period of time. So I'm on a bit of a mission. I want every school in Illinois to have a vermicompost set up. I think that would be pretty amazing. And the students that we've worked with that have seen this have just been absolutely amazed by it, and they can't wait to dig their hands in there and look and see what they're doing. And so much against my wife's wishes, I have a big vermicompost bin in my basement that I add to every week, and it's just fascinating to see how quickly they can decompose things. It's fascinating to see how other little insects get in there as well and help with decomposition. Even though I haven't added them, they've found their way in there through our food that we put in there or whatever else. And so it's a really, really cool experiment. It's something I think that's worthwhile for students to see. We have plans to do a big bin. We've also done it where on the National Ag in the Classroom Matrix, and you can buy the kits from them. They have the desktop greenhouse where you have a blacked out cup and another cup inside of it and lights. And so you can show plant growth within that little desktop greenhouse. We've done a similar thing with our vermicomposting. We just take 2 cups, you wrap the outer cup in black electrical tape, and then have a little mini vermicompost bin for students. And then they can pull it out and see the worms, but then they need to put it back into darkness because the worms don't like the light. And so they're not going to be able to do their thing unless they're in total darkness. So that's another way to do it as well, the little desktop vermicomposters. But the one bin in the classroom or one bin outside the cafeteria kind of thing works really well. So there's lots and lots of resources on vermicomposting. But if you're looking for a cool experiment and get kids thinking about decomposition and soil organisms, that's a really cool way to do that. This is also a time of year where we start hatching eggs in classrooms. And so Illinois doesn't produce a whole lot of chickens or a whole lot of eggs, but we have a very robust incubation lesson throughout schools all across the state. And so my son's in 3rd grade and he got his eggs yesterday in his classroom and talked about it all night long. And so really, really exciting time. So one of the things we thought about was, eggs through that 21-day cycle, there's some things to talk about, but you can't really see a whole heck of a lot. You can candle the eggs at different points and see what's in there a little bit, but it's not terribly exciting until the very end when they start hatching. So we created this resource. It's called Excellent Embryology. So we basically drew what was happening inside the egg each day. And on the back, it has just the bullet points explaining what's going on. And the idea would be that teachers could just cut out the eggs, laminate them, and then you can put them inside. You can just buy, Easter eggs. You can get white ones, brown ones that look more like traditional chicken eggs. And you put each of those laminated pieces in. And so each day students can open it up, see what's going on inside the eggs in their incubator, and learn a little bit about that development as well. So it's kind of a cool visual. They sell these, you can buy sets that are big plastic eggs that open up. They're about $50 each. So this costs about $2 in plastic eggs, and you can print this out. So it's a lot cheaper resources for teachers to be able to do. So again, that's available on our website, Excellent Embryology. If you do any kind of incubation activities in the spring, it's a good one to kind of pull in and connect with that. All right. Next one we'll talk about here is our outdoor adventure flip book. So one of the things that we try to get students to do is connect the natural world with how we use the natural world for recreation and for enjoyment and all these kind of things, as well as using it for agriculture as well, and show how ideas are connected, how we need to take care of the earth for a variety of different reasons. And so this flip book's a really cool way to do that. This is available on our website, but I show it to you just to give you an idea for something that you can maybe customize for yourself. And so it's not too terribly hard to format. And if you take ours, and you can take the measurements off of it and do it yourself, but it's just regular sheets of paper. And then you print it a certain way so that students can take it with them and then flip through it. And so they've got different things highlighted for the environment, for trees, for flower, for soil. And then they've even got a little pocket on the back that they can put any treasures that they find on their little outdoor adventure. And so if you're looking to get students outside and kind of better observing the natural world, this is a great way to do it. It has little activities they can do for each section. And so if you've got any natural areas around your school, this would be a cool way to do that. Again, this could be customized to do all sorts of different things. It's pretty simple to format. We luckily have some people on staff that do some great illustrating, and so we're able to access that, but there's lots of other things you can design this on and make that kind of your own thing. So yeah, that's our outdoor adventure flip book, a really cool way to get kids outside, kind of enjoying some of the springtime weather and kind of better appreciating flowers and trees and things like that around them. All right. Wheat milling. So we don't typically maybe think of wheat as a spring crop, but wheat's a really great one to talk about because, at least again here in Illinois, wheat's the first thing I see growing out in the fields because it was planted the previous fall. It's been sitting dormant all winter and it's now starting to grow again. And so it's a cool thing for students to kind of talk about. So in Illinois, at least, we don't grow a ton of wheat. And the wheat we do grow is in mostly the southern part of the state because they have just a slightly longer growing season. So they can double crop it. So the farmers that grow wheat can harvest the wheat and then they plant a short season soybean after that, and makes it a lot more economically sustainable for them. So we have a little bit of wheat production in the central and northern parts of the state, but not quite as much. I really like to talk about wheat with students because bread is such a foundational thing of human civilization, right? Every civilization through history had some form of bread. And so it's a cool way to pull in that social studies and that history thing while talking about a crop that most students they're consuming every single day as well. So you can get classroom packs of these wheat heads. So you can talk to students about the different parts of wheat, how the stalk is used for straw, for animal bedding. And so actually farmers who grow wheat can get 2 different crops off that wheat. But you can actually take the wheat head and you can actually, I'll make a mess here on my desk, you can crush it and out comes all these little wheat kernels that are going to be pretty hard for you to see on my camera. So students can pull out the kernels, they can count them, they can do some math to figure out how many kernels would come off an average plant, how many plants are in an acre, so they can kind of get an idea of do that math conversion. But what we like to do is get just a $5 pepper grinder from Walmart, and you fill it up with those wheat kernels. and you grind it. I won't grind it because I don't want to fill my laptop keys here with whole wheat flour, but you get the idea. You can grind it and out comes a fairly coarse, but it definitely looks like whole wheat flour. And so it's a cool way to talk to students about some of those industrial processes as well, where we take these wheat kernels, but it takes the work of a whole bunch of different people in a bunch of different careers to be able to get it to a product that we're actually able to consume. And it's cool too to get them to talk about, as we're grinding the wheat, how long would it take us to get enough wheat to make, say, a batch of cookies, for instance. And so it's a really neat way to kind of pull that in and connect them with that process as well. So again, these wheat heads are readily available as well, and kind of a cool way to bring that in. So wheat's another great opportunity if you want to talk about soil conservation and cover cropping. Wheat's kind of like a cover crop. It protects the soil through the winter, but it's a crop that is able to be harvested as well. And so it's a nice way to kind of introduce some of those concepts also. We got some great wheat books here. The one I'll point out here is by Illinois author Cynthia Katahota. It's called The Thing About Luck. Upper elementary, early middle school text. It's just a great book. I love it. It's about a family. They're immigrants and they are working to harvest wheat. And so they're Japanese American and they're migrant labor following the wheat harvest throughout the Western US and trying to get the wheat harvested. So they work for a custom combining operation, and it's narrated by a young girl and her brother, and they're there with their grandparents. Just an awesome book. Really great, accurate ag. It has really cool diagrams of the combines and things like that, and it pulls in a ton of really great social emotional learning things in there as well. So really great book. Highly recommend. Thing About Luck. And I think later today you're going to hear more about Bread Lab, so I won't discuss that one too much. Another one I'll point out here, Farmer George Plants a Nation. This is also by Peggy Thomas. She was the who wrote the Henry Ford book I pointed out earlier. She has a series on presidents of Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln, and this is her book about George Washington and his efforts with wheat, growing wheat in the early days of America as well. So another really good one. All right. I think I'm done just a few minutes early here, but yeah, there's Michelle again. So if there's questions that I can still answer, I'm happy to do that. If anyone has any follow-up questions, please let me know. Again, everything I talked about is on our website. We have a brand new website, so it's agintheclassroom.org. We also share a lot of resources on Facebook and Instagram in particular. So if you're interested, follow us there also. And then here's my contact information as well. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, I'd be more than happy to connect with you as well. So. All right, so I'll pause. Michelle, if you have anything to say, and I can kind of check the Q&A here if there's anything else we need to answer.
Yep, I think we just have one question in there about being able to share the PowerPoint. And I know in the past you guys have put it right up on your website.
Yep,
So
I'll take care of that today. Yep, I can do that.
awesome. Thank you. So thank you again to Chris for his outstanding presentation. Thanks to the viewers for popping by. We know, it's Saturday morning. We're certain that you enjoyed this as much as I did. It's always great to see our different states and what they can do and how we can modify it for our own states, being in Michigan or across the nation. So we are certain that you enjoyed this as well. You'll be receiving a follow-up email from the National Ag in the Classroom program later this week. That will have some of these links in there, but also an evaluation. Our next presentation will start promptly at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. So we ask that you just hold on and we'll be back on in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, we're going to share with you our video to get you excited, hopefully, about possibly attending National Ag in the Classroom virtual in-person conference this year that will be housed in Orlando, Florida. And I'm going to turn it over to Tessa and see if she can get that video going for us. And we will see you back here at 11:30, where we will be talking to book author and publishers about the Bread Lab. If you are just joining us, my name is Michelle Blodgett. I am the Michigan program leader for Michigan Agriculture in the Classroom. We have just finished up our elementary session and we'll be starting our book talk and learning about the Bread Lab live at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So please stay on the line and we will start again promptly at 11:30 a.m. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, this is Michelle Blodgett, the Michigan Agriculture in the Classroom program leader. We are going to start at 11:30 with our book talk from the Bread Lab. Please stay tuned and we will be back on at 11:30 Eastern Time. Thanks for joining us this morning. Good morning, everyone. My name's Michelle Blodgett. I am the manager of Michigan Agriculture in the Classroom, coming to you from Lansing. We are in the second part of our virtual professional development opportunity today, and we're going to start with our book talk discussion. So welcome to the National Ag in the Classroom Conference. Our sponsor is the CHS Foundation. We're grateful for this opportunity to be able to bring this to you today. And we encourage you to stay for each session, but remember the sessions are recorded and will be available on our website for viewing later this week. During each session, you can pop into our Q&A feature and we will relay these questions to our presenters. Without further ado, I am going to introduce our book session today. We're going to hear from the publisher, Philip Lee, and co-author of the Bread Lab, Kim Bincheski. Kim was raised on a small farm in New York State. In college, she went to study environmental science, and it was there that she grew to appreciate the hard work that goes into making our real food and where it comes from, and the value of supporting farms in her community. Today, she's the managing director of the Bread Lab at Washington State University. So we appreciate you getting up a little bit early to come in and join us. She's at Washington State University at Mount Vernon, where her work includes research, community outreach, and connecting farmers with bakers, chefs, and businesses. Philip Lee is the co-founder and publisher of Readers to Eaters, which promotes food literacy through stories about our diverse food cultures. I want to welcome Philip and Kim with us, and thanks for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to the two of you.
Hey, hi, Michelle.
Hello.
Are we okay? Good morning, everybody. And it is like nice and early here in the West Coast. I'm in San Francisco. And so good seeing you all. And it's been great working with you all at the Ag in the Classroom. Some of you I might have got to meet at the national conference. And so like Michelle introduced, we are an independent publisher in San Francisco that focus on books about food literacy. And this is like really telling stories about food, about the people who grow it, cook it, provide it, and really focusing on the culture of food. Some quick example, some of you may be familiar, is like one book called Farmer Will Allen and the Growing Table, part of our Food Heroes series about the urban farmer. This was like the New York State Ag in the Classroom Book of the Year last year. You know, this book, Our School Garden, is going to be the Read Across Iowa book selection next month, among one of the many book selection. And it was so great to hear Chris talking about all his program in Illinois, because I'm a big fan, and I heard his conversation about pollinators, and I just want to mention another very popular book is called The Thing About Bees. It's a poem about how pollinators play such a large role in our life. And our most recent book is a book called Sandra Katz and the Tiny Wild, about a really famous fermenter and how he got into it and how kids can understand the connection between all the microbes in the air and our body and to our larger world. So one of my favorite books, though, is one book called this book, Bread Lab. And so we get to talk a little bit about that this morning, with Kim, and I sort of co-author with Bethany Econopoli. She's in Portland. And so I'm going to jump in and we can talk a little bit more. Good morning, Kim.
Hi, Philip.
Good to see you.
Hi, Michelle. Good to see you too. Thanks to everyone for having me here today. I'm excited to get to talk about the book Bread Lab that, as Philip said, I co-authored with Bethany Econopoli. She was a PhD student here in our lab at the time that we wrote this together. So I'm going to talk first a little bit before we get into the book, a little bit about where I am today, which is the real Bread Lab. So we're part of Washington State University. So we're located about 60 miles north of Seattle. The main campus of WSU is actually in Pullman, which that's in Eastern Washington. So that's actually about 6 hours away. But we're part of a research and extension center that is located here in Mount Vernon, Washington. So we do bake a lot of bread here, but we're really a plant breeding program. Dr. Stephen Jones started the Bread Lab back in 2009. Prior to coming here, he was actually the main wheat breeder at the main campus in Pullman. So I don't know how much any of you know about the difference between Eastern Washington and Western Washington, but the climate is very different and our farmers are very different. So over in Eastern Washington, it's a lot of wheat and barley growers. They grow, it's kind of like more of a monoculture where they grow thousands of acres of wheat. Here over on the west side, so we're in Skagit Valley, we grow about 80 different crops here. So it's much more diversified. And out of those 80 crops, wheat and barley is probably economically at the very bottom of the list. So our farmers here, they grow wheat and barley really just as a rotation crop. It helps break pest and disease cycles and adds nutrients back into the soil. But historically, that wheat and barley as a cover crop it's not financially an advantage to the farmers. So really, it always has ended up going into like the feed market, or perhaps they even just till it in. So it's not a big moneymaker. So what Dr. Jones did when he moved over here from Pullman, started talking to the farmers, and at the time he thought he was going to start breeding maybe cucumbers or cabbage. But then the farmers said, no, we want you to keep breeding wheat so that what we do is we breed wheat outside of the commodity market. So our wheat and barley and rye and buckwheat that we grow is completely outside of the commodity market. We grow wheat typically is usually either a white or a red. We grow every color in between. We grow whites and reds and blues and purples and blacks. And so what we do is we grow probably thousands of different varieties every season, and we grow them in kind of picture like your kitchen table. It's about that size of a plot. It's about 4 by 10. So that's how we can grow so many different varieties. And we just basically observe them during the growing season to see which ones do well agronomically. That's kind of our priority, is that it has to work for the farmer first. And so once we kind of see which ones do well in the field, then we bring those back into the lab where we bake. So we can see some of the equipment that I have. So this is the lab. I'm in the actual bread lab itself. That's a 4-deck oven where we bake. That's a rotating convection oven. We have a room over there that has all of our kind of more sciencey equipment that I like to say. And then this is just the rest of the space here. We have those 4 tables where we it'd be our desks, or sometimes we get bakers in here. And we do workshops here too. So then we bring the wheat in here and we bake with it because we want to see how it bakes, because not every wheat is meant to be a loaf of bread, right? Some are better for pastries, some are better for cookies or pasta. So we just determine what the best use is going to be. And also we look for flavor. Oddly, in the commodity system in wheat, flavor is just not something that's really a priority. So that's really important to us. And everything we do here, we bake with 100% whole wheat, because we think that's really important to us too, is the nutrition aspect of things. Let's see. What am I missing?
Oh. We can hear you. Kim, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So
yeah, and as Phil said, so I'm the managing director here. We have 4 PhD students. They're in the crops and soils department. They all work on different things. We have one student that is working on perennial wheat, one that works on rye, one that works on barley specifically. And then another one, she's actually a registered dietitian. So her focus is really on breeding wheat that has a higher fiber content. Just as a side note, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's something like only 2% of the population actually gets the daily required intake of fiber. So we're really, in addition to our plant breeding, which we really focus on genetic diversity. We think that's really important for a climate that's in chaos, as we like to say. So all of our varieties are really genetically diverse, which when you have a commodity crop like the wheat grown in Eastern Washington, if you look out into the field, all of that wheat is going to be genetically identical. We do kind of the opposite in that. So our fields, there's really a lot of diversity there.
Great. Well, Kim, you mentioned that actually Michelle's bio mentioned that your work involved working with farmers and millers and bakers. How do you do that? How do you work with the different people?
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, we start out with these little, 4 foot by 12 foot plots. And then once we find varieties that do well, then we just have to start increasing them. We might start out with a little envelope of seed, but then you have to get to the point where you can scale that up. And so farmers can start growing it. So we have different farmers that we work with. So when we get to the point of having enough for them to start planting acreage, then we provide the seed to the farmers, and then locally, just walking distance from my office, there's Skagit Valley malting. So they're malting for brewers and distillers, and there's Karen Spring Mills. That's a new flour mill. So they're working with the local farmers to use that grain that has been developed. And so it's really been a big benefit to the farmers. They're able to have a little bit more control over where they're selling their crop and also the price that they're getting for it.
Great. With this, sorry.
Go ahead.
Does the Bread Lab also work with like educational organizations too? Yeah.
Yep, we do. So we work with our local school districts. It's real hard to get in school instruction, and it's really hard for schools to come here. There's a couple of schools that have funding and they can come here and do a field trip. And so when we have kids come here, we try to do like hands-on activities. If it's the season, we can take them to the field so they can see all the different varieties of wheat and barley and rye in the field. And if they're here in the lab, then we like to do hands-on activities like I've got some wheat, different types of wheat back here and barley. So we can have them see the wheat and we can have them do hand threshing. And then we have some little tabletop mills so they can see flour being produced. And I know I grew up on a farm, so I was always kind of aware of where my food came from, but I never thought about flour at all. I think my mom always had AP, all-purpose flour, and I just never, that just was what I thought everyone baked with, and it is what a lot of people bake with, but there's so many different varieties of wheat and can be different varieties of flour, and where does it come from, and is it whole grain? So it's just, I really like showing that aspect to kids so that they can think about that too, think about where their flour comes. We've had bakers tell us that, like they've never seen real grain before. And so, we're trying to I just applied for a grant with a small community foundation to try and get a little bit of funding so that we can go into schools and do some demonstrations there. And it's one of our PhD students actually is really interested in doing this because she likes linking the history aspect of food and farming and doing those hands-on activities with kids. And then of course we always like to have the end where we can have them try some 100% whole wheat cookies or rye.
Great. Well, this is a nice segue into the book itself. Like this, I think that we talk about talking to kids about flowers. And I think this is like kind of going back a few years ago when we started having our conversation about making a book, so maybe you can tell us about the book and like, what is it? What is the Bread Lab about? And how is that different? How does that connect to your work?
So the Bread Lab book it's about Iris. She's a 10-year-old girl and she spends the day with her aunt, who just happens to be a plant scientist. But she's also an avid home baker. So she comes to spend the day with Iris and she brings her sourdough starter with her. And so the book takes you through kind of their day together. And baking bread, and they're baking 100% whole wheat loaf with sourdough. So there's a lot of downtime. So when they have their downtime, they go to the park and they talk about food and they talk about farming, but it also takes you through the process of baking, and also talks a little bit about working with sourdough starter. So it really for us combined all the aspects of food and farming and science.
Well, one thing I think it was really fun to work with you on the book. And one of the things that I really enjoy is that, we want to have, as a publisher, we want to have a story about bread. It's just like, it's so integral. And in fact, getting ready for our talk this morning, I had a really nice bagel, and I really there's a new bagel shop that opened up nearby, and they make wonderful bagels. And I just want to share some of the artwork from the book too, so just to give people an idea, because it's not just about what I like, when what you and Bethany did. It's not just a straight story about this is how we make bread, but it also explains the science of bread. It's starting with spreads like that about bread being holy and where do the holes come from, and it makes it really fun. And then one of my absolute favorite is there's a spread here where we talk about sourdough, and what I find when we talk to kids about sourdough is they instantly crinkle their nose because it's sour, and and you remember how do you describe sour here? This is something from the lab. Where
as grass and lemons.
I love
which is a
that.
great description.
Yeah, and we've done presentation to kids where it instantly, we have a bowl of sourdough and it's oh, smell it, and they say, oh, it's sour, and they're again, they crinkle their nose and then want to run away. And I said it's because it's look at the book, and it's kind of a cross between grass and lemon, and instantly it's oh, let me try, and it's what we find is that relationship to a food instantly can change, from having new vocabulary about it. And so, us as publishers trying to introduce more words about flavor. It's not just how do we get beyond yuck and yum and have that conversation that is a little deeper and richer and allow them to have more, control and understanding about what they eat. So again, this is really great. And
yeah, and I don't want to interrupt you, Philip,
no,
but
please,
I just wanted to say too, that's such a great activity that kids can do. You can do it at home, or you can do it in school and classes, because it's not, most classrooms don't have ovens and just don't have the equipment to actually make bread at school, but it sure is easy to make sourdough starter. It's just flour and water, and it's just such a great little science experiment that's just so easy and fun, I think, for kids. And then, maybe some of them can take it home and bake with it at home.
Right. And again, here's another really fun spread from the book to talk about
that's
the microbe.
One of my favorites. I love that
page. and I also want to add, with the artwork, when we plan a book, the artists really bring in their vision as well. We work very hard in writing the story and telling this process of making bread, right? But then the artist comes in and introduce areas that we just, here we've been editing the book for a long time, and we still don't expect. And one thing she did, for one thing, is that she added a dog. And that it turned out and it doesn't have to be integral. It's just she just kind of introduced a dog here in a little corner when she's making bread. And it's always a dog. It's always have the tail and the eyes and the ears just popping up. And that just makes it so much more fun. And that, that's part of the collaboration, working with writers and artists, that we think so deeply about a story, yet a year later, someone else comes in and they just add a whole new element to it and really enjoy. And then, of course, at the back of the book, then you also have bread facts as well as the recipe. One thing that I also want to get your thoughts is with this book, we partner with the Bread Bakers Guild of America, and you also tell me about the partnerships at the Bread Lab here with the BBGA as well as King Arthur. How do you work with King Arthur? And I think the recipe was also integral to that. Can you tell me more?
Sure. Yeah, so King Arthur became a sponsor of ours pretty early on, and probably back in 2010. We used to have a conference where we had about 300 people, and we did workshops, hands-on baking activities, and panel discussions, and King Arthur was a sponsor of ours. And we've just continued that partnership. And now in our facility, we moved to this lab back in 2015 to a larger space. I don't know if all of you are familiar with King Arthur, well, formerly Flour, and now it's King Arthur Baking Company, but they do sell flour. But at their main location in Vermont, they have a baking school. And so when we moved into this facility, they decided to have a baking school out here. So right down the hall from me actually is the King Arthur Baking School. They have class going on today. And so it's just been, they're just really supportive. They actually, in addition to having their baking school here, they support one of our PhD students. So for our PhD students, we have to kind of find outside funding for all of them. So they are supporting her, which is just really, it's just an amazing partnership. And when they have certain classes, when they do, classes on whole wheat, we usually do tours of the lab, and sometimes we do milling demonstrations. So it's just been a really great partnership. And Bread Bakers Guild of America, same there. They've just always been, a financial supporter of ours. And then sometimes they use our facility for some of the workshops that they do. So we partner with them on that too.
And that's something I also want to add, our company, Readers to Eaters, obviously we publish books about food, but Readers to Eaters also describes our partnership program where the reader part, like schools and libraries, are getting more involved in food programming. And so we often introduce these traditional literacy organizations to food. And then we also work with the eater part, a lot of traditional food organizations, and remind them that they can now be part of a literacy center, like that by hosting reading about books about food, it allows them to connect to new kind of partners as well as funding. And so that's something that we do a lot, and that's what you all are doing too. And that's we're really pleased to connect with like the Bread Baker Guild on this project. Now, one thing I want to just also check with you, very much a part of this, the books, again, is more than just about making bread, so much more than just making bread, but also about science, about food science. Tell me a little bit about what do you want kids to know about food science?
Well, I want science to be accessible to kids for sure. So I think just getting out there and being able to, doing little experiments at home if you can. And also, I really want kids and parents and caregivers to think about not just where their food comes from, but what is in the food that they're eating. And we talk about that a little bit in the book when they're looking at, or Iris is wondering how are they going to make bread out of four ingredients. And so I think it's really important to be aware of that. And not that I want to mention any brands, but there's a lot. The bread aisle in the grocery store these days can be kind of overwhelming. But even the ones that kind of market themselves as being really healthy, if you look at the ingredients, there's a lot of non-food ingredients in there. So we just, that's something I think that was really important to us in the book, was to get people to think not just about baking your own bread, but thinking a little bit more about the ingredients that are in the bread that you buy, and really, all of the food that we buy these days, to look for those non-food ingredients.
Well, I mean, this also kind of goes back to your work with the community, and something that I want to, see if you can share about some project that how Bread Lab works with the community, as in the case of the affordable loaf. Can you tell me a little bit more about that program?
Yeah, so we started the approachable loaf, we call it actually. And not that, we're certainly didn't invent the sandwich style loaf of bread that's sliced. But that's really what a lot of people recognize as bread. And we kind of realized that when we would donate some of our extra loaves and we make them to food banks, and it was more the rustic style loaves. And then we kind of realized that when we were doing that, as much as it was appreciated, oftentimes that bread wasn't being taken by clients because it's just not familiar. So we started working on the approachable loaf. So it's just 100% whole wheat. We make 100% whole wheat, but we ask, so it's open to any bakeries out there. They can be part of we call it the Bread Lab Collective, and it's made with at least 60% whole wheat, has under 7 ingredients in there and no non-food ingredients. And it's been really successful, and we bake that here at the lab. We try and do once a month bakes and of the approachable loaf, and that all gets donated to the Friendship House, which is our local, it's a free cafe, a shelter, transitional housing facility. So yeah, trying to get more whole wheat out there into the community.
Yeah, and I've seen some schools submitting their photos of their approachable loaf, and it's really great. And speak of that with resource, kind of like final comment, we're almost out of time. So I just want to add that, people can also write us Kim and her team has created we have coloring sheets, crossword puzzle, and word search games. It's all based on the Bread Lab book and other ideas about whole wheat, and baking and so on. So you can also email me for that information. And yeah, there's different coloring sheets and so on. And we provided links in our chat here more about Bread Lab. And
I think Philip, we talked a little bit about if there's any classrooms out there that want to participate somehow or do like a sourdough experiment or do some baking. I think Philip offered to send a few books your way. Yeah.
So we can discuss we can have a little raffle for Bread Lab and send us photos of your baking with kids, or your garden that relates to growing wheat and so on. And well, I'll follow up, and we'll have some fun.
Are there any questions in the chat that we can answer in the next 2 minutes?
Not at this time. So what I want to do is I want to thank both of you for getting up early this morning, being on the West Coast. I am a sourdough connoisseur myself, so I love it. So thanks to Philip and Kim for their outstanding presentation. I also wanted a specific shout out to Philip and the Readers to Eaters for being one of our sponsors today, and allowing us to be able to bring this opportunity to educators across the U.S. I was going to say the state because I'm used to being in Michigan only, but just from a national perspective and sharing these amazing books that you have, but also Kim, your work and how you're involving the community and all of those great opportunities. It's been great. We've been able to drop these in the chat, and we'll make sure that we send these resources also in our follow-up email to the educators as well. So all of us appreciate your time. I know I enjoyed learning about it and seeing the science connected to all of it as well. As I said, National Ag in the Classroom thanks you for your time, and hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of your day. We will have another session coming up here in about 3 minutes for our secondary focus on water and soil, working with some of our partners in Oklahoma. So if you can hold on for about 2 more minutes, but thanks again to Philip and Kim for their time, and Philip and Readers to Eaters for making some amazing books available to a lot of our educators across the U.S. So thank you again, and we'll see you in about a minute. Thanks everyone.
See you guys out.
Thank you. Hey folks, this is Kevin Darty, and I am the state contact for Illinois, and I will be your host for our secondary session. We were fortunate to have an author and a publisher. Awfully cool. If you haven't had a chance, go check out Bread Lab. Go check out the Bread Lab. We dropped that link in the chat. Really fascinating materials there. Plus, check out the books at readerstoeaters.com. Philip Lee as a publisher, all of his books. I put in the chat as well. not only great stories that will engage your students, but phenomenal back matter at the end of the story. So check out both of those as our sponsor, and we'll give just another minute. Jeri and Jacklyn, if you guys want to go ahead and unmute yourself and turn on, we'll get you guys started here in just a minute. I know you've got a hard stop coming up, but we will get there. It's Jeri and Jacklyn. We got you both. Let's test your audio. Hot dog, I hear you both as well. That's great. So
awesome. Do you want me to go ahead and share my screen, or?
Yes, you go ahead and you get your screen set up, and we'll give us just as soon as you're ready here in just another minute, we'll get going. I know you've got a hard stop, so we will be there.
All right.
And
well, I got a little bit of a reprieve, so my other presentation got pushed back just a little bit. So
well, great. I will monitor the chat and try and answer as many of the questions as I can. If I have any, I will save those at the end and put them on to you. If you see them, that's great. Looks like Jacklyn's actually on the move, so keep both hands on the wheel, Jacklyn. All right, but with that, we'll go ahead and begin, folks. My name is Kevin Darty, and I'm the state contact for Illinois. Welcome to our virtual conference. We are so excited that you could be part of this virtual conference, sponsored by the CHS Foundation and also our partners from Readers to Eaters. We are excited that you could be here with us. This is our secondary, skewing just a little higher than our earlier session. During the sessions, you'll be able to use the Q&A section, and as your host, I'll work to relay these questions to the presenters. Please follow up with your state Ag in the Classroom program if you have any questions afterwards. Also, I highly encourage you, go to the National Ag in the Classroom website and type in, for this one, water. There are tons of extra resources that Jeri and Jacklyn will mention, and we've used a lot of their materials on there. But we are excited to bring to you today, Jeri Fleming, and Jeri has presented with us Riverology, using a local approach to protect water quality. I'm very excited about that, being from Illinois. You talk about being on the Illinois River as well. Now, Jeri, I will let you and Jacklyn introduce yourself as you go, but I'll let you guys go ahead and begin. Thank you for joining us, and folks, use that chat feature in the Q&A section, and we will let them get started. Thank you, Jeri.
thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Jacklyn, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Is my audio working?
Yep.
Okay. So good morning, everyone from Oklahoma. I'm doing this virtual presentation from my car because my son's last basketball game started just 2 minutes ago. So I'm going to do my part and then turn it over to Jeri. And thank you for inviting us to present today. I also have my first grader, Mallory, in the car with me. So hopefully she follows my rules about being quiet. But we're excited to present Riverology 201, which is a program that we put together for teachers in Oklahoma. I'm going to talk a little bit about what GRDA is and kind of tie it into what Jeri's going to present. So Jeri, if you want to move to the next slide. So the Grand River Dam Authority is actually an electric utility in Oklahoma. And you're probably sitting there thinking, what does electricity have to do with ag? And so hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll be able to make that connection. But at a glance, we basically generate, transmit, and sell electricity to Oklahoma municipalities, electric co-ops, industrial customers. And we also have coal, gas, water, wind. Jeri and I are in the division for water, obviously, and we are in the divisions where we manage about 70,000 surface acres of water. And in the state, we also are over scenic rivers in Oklahoma. And GRDA was established as a conservation and reclamation district for the waters of the Grand River. And you'll kind of see a glimpse of how big the Grand River is in our watershed later on in the presentation. Like I said, we have a very diverse generation portfolio. We have coal, 3 hydropower projects. We have natural gas. We also have a unique pump storage project, which kind of acts like a battery. We pump water up when it's cheap and we generate it out when it's needed. And so that's kind of a unique project that Jeri and I get to work on. Next slide. Did it switch, Jeri?
Not yet.
Okay.
It's being slow for some reason. Technology is a wonderful thing when it works.
Maybe unshare and share again. I don't know if that would help.
Yeah.
I thought my camera was on me. I'm sorry if you're looking at my steering wheel.
Okay. I'm going to share just my regular PowerPoint and we'll just go through it that way.
Okay.
That way I know it works.
Jeri actually is in Brazil. She care of her brother had surgery. So we kind of are doing this in two different remote places. So back to GRDA, we are the second only to the Oklahoma Water Resources Board in jurisdiction over state waters. So out of the state of Oklahoma, GRDA is second to the Water Resources Board. At no cost to our taxpayers, we provide storage and water supply for about 50 water districts and municipal systems, including Tulsa, Oklahoma. We spend about, or according to the Army Corps of Engineers, which we work with very closely on our 3 hydropower projects, we spend about $1 million, or every dollar spent on flood mitigation benefits the state about $6 in cost and damages that have been saved in the economy. So it's definitely an economic engine and brings a lot of jobs and opportunities for the Northeast Oklahoma area. Some of the other things that GRDA does at no cost to taxpayers, this is all through this power of, or the sale of electricity. We have a law enforcement and lake patrol division under Jeri and I's group. We have a shoreline management crew, which goes around and does extensive cleanups and removing dilapidated structures, etc. We have a water quality division where we have 2 or 3 biologists and research professionals in our group that do a lot of water quality testing, working with landowners on practices near the shoreline to help water quality. Again, I mentioned our scenic rivers operations. We also have tourism and economic development. We have an ecosystems and education center where Jeri and I office out of that brings a lot of visitors throughout the country. And then again, our ecological protection group, which I kind of touched base with when I talked about the water quality group working with landowners. So our mission is basically to deliver affordable, reliable electricity with a focus on efficiency and a commitment to environmental stewardship, which is where Jeri and I kind of fall in. We are dedicated to economic development, providing resources and supporting economic growth, and our employees are our greatest asset in meeting our mission to be the Oklahoma Agency of Excellence. We kind of deem this as our 5 E's, but Jeri and I kind of joke we really need a 6th E and incorporate education because our board of directors and executive management has really emphasized the need for environmental education. And that's kind of where Jeri and I have taken the role to develop a lot of programs. And we're just going to touch on one of them today to educate not just teachers, but educate students. We have several summer camps. We do a lot of one-day workshops. We bring students in from around the area for different activities. And so that's kind of where, when I said earlier, tying what does a power company have to do with ag, and our connection is water. And so we put together this curriculum, and Jeri's going to talk a little bit about our workshop, Riverology 201, where we introduce this curriculum and share it with teachers. But our goal with the education is to provide tools, resources, programs to teachers. We try to target teachers in our area, but through our involvement with Ag in the Classroom and other state agencies and resources, we've been able to expand that almost nationally now, because we presented last year and are invited to present again this year. So with that, if there are any questions specific to GRDA, I'm happy to answer. If not, I'll turn it over to Jeri and let her kind of talk about our program and the curriculum that we've developed.
Yeah, thanks, Jacklyn. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. As she said, I'm actually in Sao Paulo, Brazil right now, and it's summer here, so they're having a nice summer thunderstorm. So I'm hoping that my internet works well. So what is Riverology 201? And last year we called it Riverology 101. We've actually are enhancing it this year. We're adding and expanding some of the programming that we offer to the teachers this year. Still, teachers will get Project WET training if you're familiar with that. But the big thing we did was develop a curriculum that is targeted to 4th grade, because obviously that's when you start learning about natural processes and erosion and all that kind of thing. So we targeted it to 4th grade. However, it's very easily adaptable. We worked with a professor at the University of Oklahoma to develop it, so we ensured that it met Oklahoma science standards. And it's really easily modified for grades, but also for your watershed. So where do you live? So I'll just start out and you know, I said last year, most of you may know what a watershed is. And then somebody said, well, they didn't. So you work in it all the time. You forget that that's something that maybe you learned a really long time ago and forgot what it was. So I'll just explain a little bit again. What is a watershed? It's just an area of land that when water falls on it, it drains to one location. And it's delineated by topography. So you can think of it, and I use this example a lot. It's a good way to show it with kids too. Just make a fist with your hand and say, okay, I have 2 different watersheds coming off my hand, because if water falls right here on the top, it's either going to run down this way or it's going to run down that way. This side is one watershed and this side is another watershed. So it's just depending on where the water falls and where it drains. Our watersheds are affected by both point source and non-point source pollution. So erosion, agricultural runoff, and urban runoff. Point source pollution is, we can point to the source and say, okay, there's a factory. It has a pipe coming out of it that's discharging wastewater into a stream. I can look at that wastewater, test it, and say that a particular pollutant came from that plant. I can point to it. Non-point source can't do that with, right? I was thinking about it last night when I was thinking about different activities to help explain how we impact a watershed. So one thing you could do, apologize, is put your kids in a circle, have them put all their hands, you know, together in the circle like this with their fingers touching and slightly pointing down, and either have them get dirt on it or put a little drop of food coloring or something on their hands, and then spray it with a squirt bottle all around, and then watch all that water flow to the center. Have a cup or a bucket or something where all that water flows to the center where their hands come together and go in, and then ask them in that bucket, who caused that pollution? Why is that water dirty? Well, it's dirty because of all of us, because we've all done something. We've, you know, dumped a Coke out on the ground, or we've spilled some oil or whatever. And once it gets together, we don't know what that point is. I can't point to a particular kid and say that part of that pollution came from you, right? So non-point source pollution is just water running off the land. And when it ends up in the water, it's kind of all commingled, and we can't specifically point to the source. So the Grand Lake watershed where we work is huge. It goes up into Kansas. In fact, only 8% of our watershed is actually in Oklahoma. Most of our watershed is in Kansas. The interesting thing is most of the population is in Missouri and Arkansas. So our watershed covers 4 states. So for us to make a change in the watershed, it can be a little bit of a challenge, right? Because we've got water flowing from Kansas into Oklahoma. So we do partner with the other states. There's an organization called the Multi-Basin Council, where the 4 states that touch there, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, get together once a quarter and talk about what each of us are doing in our watersheds for education to try to protect it. What can we do? I did a little, went and did some research because I've, when I started working for GRDA a few years ago, that's what you hear is most of the watershed lies in Kansas, most of the population's in Missouri, really. But I took the 4 counties in Arkansas and Missouri that make up our watershed and looked at their population. And then I looked at the 4 counties in Oklahoma that are in our watershed and looked at their population. The difference was in those 4 counties in Missouri and Arkansas, there were 380,000 people. In those 4 counties in Oklahoma, there were 34,000 people. So it is true. So we get impacted by a lot. But I like to remind people that we all live in a watershed. I don't care where you are. I'm in a watershed. I'm not an American watershed. I'm in a Brazilian watershed, but I'm still in a watershed, right? Doesn't matter where you are, you're in a watershed. And watersheds come in all sizes. So we saw the giant, big Grand Lake watershed. And then we look at this picture where I actually have different colored outlined areas, and those are smaller watersheds. So I'm sorry, I'm going to talk and cough now. So in those smaller watersheds, I like to tell people you've got to think about the larger watershed, but act locally. It's the think globally, act locally thing, right? If we can make a change in our little bit, in our little section of the watershed, ultimately we're going to make bigger changes throughout. So what people do in their watershed can make a difference. I realize this is not a lot about the curriculum yet, but I feel like it's important to get this background information to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page when we start talking about it. So another thing we talk a lot about is how landscapes impact water quality. So we can think about a concrete parking lot and how it's going to impact water, because most of the water that falls on that is going to run off. It is not going to soak in. It's an impervious surface. But how do other things affect it? So when we leave a landscape alone, just leave it in a natural way, we actually decrease runoff, we increase infiltration, and we reduce the heat island effect. So if you're in the middle of New York City in July and the sun's beating down and there's not a shade tree in sight, it's going to be a whole lot hotter there than it is going to be in the middle of Central Park, where there's lots of trees, green space, you're getting some evapotranspiration going on. It's just going to be cooler. You're also going to keep more water on site. So the more water you can keep on your farm, on your yard, that's less water that you're having to use by watering your crops or your plants or whatever. So you're going to get about 50% of the water infiltrating when you just have a natural area, and you're only going to get about 10% running off. When you start changing that, whether it's to cropland, whether it's to pasture, whether it's to a more urbanized area, then you start changing the flow of water on that land. So you actually will decrease your infiltration and increase runoff. Now on pasture land, it's probably going to be a little more similar, not exactly, because the cattle are compacting a little bit. It depends on how it's managed. You're going to get more infiltration, obviously, than if it's a concrete parking lot in a house. That's just all going to run off. As little as 10 to 20% change in landscaping or in adding impervious surface can double the amount of runoff that you're getting. When you double that runoff, you're carrying with it everything that it's picking up on the land, and that's carrying more pollution, and you have less water infiltrating, so we're not recharging our groundwater the same way. So our runoff increases by 20%. Our infiltration at 10 to 20% impervious surface is actually only going to go down about 6 to 8%. So you can see the more we add, the more runoff we're getting. By the time you get to 75 to 100%, you're only allowing about 10%, 10 to 15% to infiltrate, and you're running off, you know, like 55%. So we're really sending that water away. So I say all that to kind of get to the curriculum. So what we're trying to help students understand is the impact that they have on the land, right? Like, let's say you clear all the vegetation off of something and you only leave soil, you're going to have issues with erosion because you're not going to have anything to hold that in place. So what we've done with this curriculum is try to look at patterns, some cross-cutting effects, looking at some science and engineering practices. So we asked them to plan and carry out some investigations. So let's take some soil and put it in a tray and add some water. Let's see what happens. And then let's make a change to that. Maybe add some grass on top of it, or maybe put a sponge at the bottom to see what the sponge absorbs, and then try that again and see what happens. So, you know, using some critical thinking skills and figuring out, hey, let's see what changes we can make to make a difference, and then analyze and interpret that data. So do we add some kind of filter, and how much less pollution enters the waterway? If you do it with soil, sometimes you can let it dry up and then measure how much soil is in the discharge, what you allowed to flow off. You can do it with nutrients. Add fertilizer to the soil, and then get a little phosphorus test and test. Okay, if we add grass, does less phosphorus enter the waterway or more? That kind of thing. And then constructing explanations for the science and figuring out the solutions. So you're bringing in your science and engineering. And then the disciplinary core ideas are earth materials and systems, plate tectonics and large-scale system interactions, natural hazards, and then designing solutions to those engineering problems. We include a lot of background information for the teachers, some of the common water quality measures and problems, supply list, and then it includes a seven-day lesson plan. And it starts by introducing the phenomenon, which is erosion, is really what we're trying to do. And the whole reason to do this, to kind of come up with this, is to help students recognize, because when you start teaching about earth sciences, and maybe one of your examples is the Grand Canyon, that's geologic erosion. It's happened over time. You know, some of it was plate stuff too, but when you think about the erosion part of it, it happened over time. If you don't live at the Grand Canyon, it's a little harder to bring it home. But if you can talk about it in your watershed, we talk about it in our watershed, in the Grand Lake watershed, then that takes it home. So trying to tie it back to where you live. So we introduce it, we explore it, explain it, elaborate, and evaluate. So that's kind of what's inherent in the curriculum. These are the science standards it's meet. Again, this is Oklahoma. Yours is probably similar, but maybe not exactly the same, but it could be easily tweaked. So again, using it in your area, the basic concept is the same. You've got erosion, you've got watersheds, you've got water quality impacts, you have human impacts on the environment. The difference, again, is making it local to your students. So how do you do that? So this is a fun one. How to find your watershed is modeled by watershed.org. And last year I did Saratoga Springs, New York, because that's where the conference was. I didn't want to do Orlando because I know where that's the in-person conferences this year, because then it just all goes into the ocean. So I picked Ames, Iowa. Try someplace new, right? So I picked Ames, Iowa. and said, what is the watershed that I'm in? So here's, oh, my mouse is going to work. So I don't know if you can see that, but here is one of the watersheds around Ames, Iowa. And what I picked was Huck 12. So the way you know how to pick, you can either draw it when you go in to select your boundary, you can draw it, or you can use a Huck 8, Huck 10, or Huck 12 watershed. And those Hucks are a hydrologic unit designated by the U.S. Geologic Survey. And so it's just kind of a good way to do it. A Huck 8 watershed would be really big, and a Huck 12 watershed gets it down to a little bit smaller size. So, that's one of the watersheds. And then what I did is I went and looked at, well, what's the land cover land use? Because I could use that with my students. And in this case, what you see is in Ames itself, you see a lot of red, and that is medium to high intensity development. And then on the left side of the screen where it's more brown, that's all cultivated crops. So you can talk about, the land use changes there and how that's going to impact the watershed, because you're going to have different impacts from the cropland than you are obviously from the urban area. And then I looked at the soil group. And this can be important because the type of soil you have could mean it's either more or less erosive. For example, sand is less erodible than clay because when you think about going to the beach, right, you have a wave that washes up, and when the water falls on it, it kind of soaks back in, right? There's a lot of pore space in there. With clay, it's really tight. So when it rubs, it's kind of rubbing some of that off. So sand is less erodible than clay. So you can look at it for that. The other thing that soil is going to tell you is infiltration. So have I got moderate infiltration rates or high infiltration rates? Because that's also going to tell me to a certain extent how much more erodible my soil is going to be. If it's high infiltration, the water's not sitting there very long. It's going through, so it doesn't necessarily have time to run off and move it. Also, pebble size and soil size, that kind of thing is going to make a difference as well. But it's just something else for them to look at and think about, is what kind of soil do you have and how fast is it infiltrating? And then I also looked at, I think this is slope. So how steep is your slope is going to tell you how fast the water's running. The faster the water's running, the more erosion you're going to have, right? And so in this instance, it looks like it's pretty flat. In a lot of places, maybe looks like the average is about a 1.5% slope, and it's low elevation. So it's going to give you the elevation as well. So, out in the cropland area, it's more flat. In the city, there's a little bit more, and around the streams, you're getting a little bit higher elevation. So you can use that as well. And then this is just mean precipitation. This is June, I think, is where it stopped on. And you can see they really get very little rain in the winter, and most of their rain comes in the summer. And then again, little rain in the fall and winter. So you can use that as well. Like, when are you going to have more erosion happening? That kind of thing. And then another fun one is Sam Learner. And it's called River Runner. And again, I dropped a drop of water in Ames, Iowa. And what it does is it'll actually fly over using Google Earth images. And so it'll start in Squaw Creek and then goes to South Skunk River and the Skunk River, and then ultimately the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico. And it's one way to help your students better understand what impact that they're having on the ocean. Because a lot of times we're Oklahoma, we're a landlocked state. We don't have beaches. We're not on the ocean. So we don't always think about how we might impact the ocean. However, when I talk to kids about things and I talk about what kind of fish do we have or whatever, how does trash impact, aquatic life? they'll bring up ocean animals, sea turtles, sharks, dolphins, whatever. So this is one way to show them that, yeah, what you're doing here is affecting it. The other thing you can do is you can pause it. So it's like a video and it flies over. You can pause it and kind of zoom in and look at different land use changes along the route to the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico. And then another one that's kind of a good one is mywaterway.epa.gov. And in it, again, you can find your watershed where you live, see what streams are in it. This one in particular had, Ames has 3 streams running through it. It has 214 monitoring locations. And there's 6 what they call permitted discharges. That's that point source. So you could do a little investigation with that, see what's there. So it gives you a lot of information. If there's water quality information, it will give you that. So you could have the kids investigate that. And then there's the runoff model, My Watershed. And this is just another example to show when I start changing impervious surface, I start changing runoff patterns. So for example, this was kind of a medium, I think, medium developed with high infiltration soils. I get a ½ inch of rain I'm running off about half of that and infiltrating about half of that. And in this case, it's mostly buildings, so I'm not getting very much evapotranspiration, but you can change to different soil types, different types of land, low development, open development, that kind of thing, and just let the kids kind of explore what changes with their watershed. The other thing we do is to demonstrate erosion, and we did this with at the National Ag in the Classroom last year, is get a paint tray, pretty cheap, get them at whatever paint store, Walmart, wherever you go. I spray painted mine with some brown to simulate the dirt. And I got some fake grass and some sponges and some animals. And then I can put food coloring on it. And you can see in the one blue tray with the water that I had some pollution runoff. And then I'll pick up the sponges and show them, look, my sponge caught this. This is what leaving a riparian area along a stream will do. When you leave vegetation or when you have tall grasses, it's going to stop that erosion. And they can try it with different things. And this is where, and again, pretty inexpensive, pretty self-contained, easy to let the kids kind of figure out how to do things with it. The other thing I've done is gone to a sod farm and got scrap sod and put in them and let the kids experiment with the sod in it and what things run off. If you can get the sod to grow some, you can have longer sod and shorter sod and see what happens. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with this. You can also, I'm sorry, apparently the air's dry, even though it's raining, it's weird. In the other one where they've got the green and the blue, they were using it to demonstrate a wetland and how a wetland works. So their sponges act like the wetland part, and then going into the lake and how that kind of helps clean things. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with that. And then in our case, we have a video, and I don't know that the sound's going to work. I tried this last night with something else, and the sound didn't really work very well, and go through the. But so we have a video that talks about a blue-green algae, a harmful algal bloom that we use as part of our curriculum. So have the kids watch that, and that was a result of too much nutrients and too much rain and then not enough rain. And so use that as part of their investigation. If you have something similar, and a lot of watersheds, which you may not necessarily be aware of, but check around your area and Google watershed groups, because they will a lot of times have information that then you can use to kind of bring things back home to your class. So we do that. And then again, we've got our Grand Lake watershed. So we talk about that. And then this is the land use cover in our watershed. And so that's another thing that we can talk about, again, is how those land use changes are going to affect everything. And I got through that really fast. Some other things that you can do besides the paint trays to demonstrate a watershed, and some of you may already know this, is take some tin foil, or you can do it with paper. You could also do it with wax paper and crumple it up, and then have the kids kind of spread it back down, and you're going to have hills and valleys, and you can take a non-permanent marker and mark on it and then spray it with the bottle and see where things go. Watch where the pollution, or watch how the water runs off, to demonstrate how things work in a watershed. Check with your local soil and water conservation district or conservation district. A lot of times they have a lot of tools to help with that. Also, as agriculture moves, and it's happening a lot in Oklahoma and some in Kansas, moving more towards soil health and cover crops and regenerative agriculture, then you can incorporate talking about how the roots can help hold the soil in place, the importance of the roots, the living organisms in the soil, and all of that can be incorporated with your land uses and what you're doing. With that, this is our contact information. Feel free to reach out if you want a copy of the curriculum. I know I had somebody reach out last year and we sent it to them. We're more than happy to share it. We got an EPA grant to help us develop it. And so we are tickled to death to send it out, let people use it. We're happy to answer questions about what we're doing and some of the things that we have learned and experienced from trying.
Well, thank you, Jeri. And I know Jacklyn had to jump off to go cheer on her son in that last basketball game. Yeah. We really thank you for the taking the time to chat with us today. No open questions right now. No open questions, and there's nothing in the chat. However, I do want to say to those that are joining us, check out the National Agriculture in the Classroom webpage, agclassroom.org. In the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see the career matrix. You type in water or watersheds, erosion, soil. Oh my gosh, you talked about a ton of stuff there, Jeri. So not only environmental outreach, but also educational outreach. Lots of great lessons to go along with this from a secondary level. Several great books. If you go to the Ag in the Classroom, National Ag in the Classroom site, you'll see a number of companion resources as well. And the importance of water. Really like that aspect that Jacklyn brought in as the coordinator of hydropower, but that aspect of water. In Illinois, it seems like we think about water every 5 years. 5 years we have too much, then 5 years later we don't have enough. But there are other places that it's a much bigger deal. And how does that work? And everyone is thinking of it. Tessa has dropped in a short evaluation into the chat feature. You can jump on it and look for that. But I don't see any other questions. Oh, no, we got a question now. Explain, sorry, we got somebody that wants you to explain the watershed trays again. If you go back and pull that up, Jeri, that's a cool look at that. And stopping erosion, we do have time for you to do that. That'd be great.
So these are the trays. And again, what I did was you take a paint tray, and the nice thing about them is they're already slanted. You don't have to do anything special. And what I will do is either take a little bit of soil or food coloring and put a little drop on it, and then take a spray bottle and just spray it on there and watch it run down into the bottom of the tray to see the pollution flow, and then add things back to it to see how you can stop it. So for example, I have sponges here. I will say my fake grass did not last very long. It didn't work and I took it out, but the sponges give you that sort of same idea of when you have grass or something to slow that flow of water down, it's going to catch it. And then you pick up your sponge and look at the bottom of it, and it's got soil on it. It's got the food coloring on it. It's got whatever. So you can set it up a lot of different ways. The other thing you can do is you could packet the top part of it with soil. I've done that as well, put quite a bit of soil in it, and then, you know, squirt water over it, or, you know, find some way to sprinkle it a little heavier, and it will actually start cutting channels. And so it's a really cool way to show kids how rivers are formed and water's channel. It's just I don't know, there's just a lot you can do with it, because it's kind of its own little watershed, if you will. And you can try all kinds of different things. So I hope that answered your question. And I'm happy.
Nope, that's it's a great lesson. This is there are a number of lessons out there. Again, you can visit the Grand River Dam Authority as well to get that. But I also put in a lesson from the Matrix, that it's the second lesson down there on under watersheds, that you can find that as well. Karen, great question. So how about any other questions? If there aren't any other questions, you can put them in the question and answer session. We'd be happy to do that. Andy has asked me to, he jumped on and asked me to remind folks that this is the National Ag in the Classroom virtual conference is sponsored by CHS. We had you told us you were traveling, Jeri. You didn't tell us that you were going to be international. So we're very excited that she'll be branching out. And next thing you know, we will be looking to maybe we can do a San Paulo for National Ag in the Classroom. It's like 2 in the afternoon your time, right? Or 3 in the afternoon.
Exactly. Yeah, it's 2:41 here now. Yeah, my brother lives down here, and I did not know I was going to be down here when I agreed to do this. And so, I mean, I will say that's the one benefit of technology is I can be in Sao Paulo with my brother and go back to, I'm giving a talk to some folks in Arkansas after this. So, you know, that is the one benefit of it, but yeah.
Yeah.
And it's summer here, which is.
Just think 3 years ago, we hadn't Zoomed at all. And now we're coming to us live from Brazil. We do have a question again, trying to they use the disposable trays, trying to figure out a way to make them that are more reusable. We've seen that too. You can actually use the sturdier paint trays. They're just kind of a mess to clean up too. We use that, and all about reducing, reusing, and recycling, but bringing them back in at Illinois Ag in the Classroom, finding a place to clean them up, dry them out, and store them, that's an issue as well. You can check that. Also, a number of soil and water conservation districts in the Midwest, I don't know where you're from, Karen, but in the Midwest, a number of our SWCDs have erosion tables. And sometimes even for a bigger event, you might actually get them to bring an outside. It's an outside thing, not an inside thing, but they actually show what it looks like with different types of erosion. So a cool thing for an environment day or celebrating Earth Day as that comes up as well. So again, those are all regional, and it depends. In Illinois, some counties have them, some counties don't, but they oftentimes will work back and forth. But everybody wants to do erosion from about March 1st till about May 1st. And you know, it's kind of like poultry. You can do it anytime. It doesn't have to happen just on that bulletin board cycle. We have to worry about erosion and water quality throughout the year, not just in the spring.
That's right.
So keep that in mind. Augusta, Georgia. Perfect. Thank you, Karen. Check with that. And we're glad to have you joining us from Georgia. Well, with that, we will let folks go and enjoy part of the rest of their day here. Believe we got all those answered. We've got those all taken care of. With that, again, thank you all for joining us. There is the JOT form for the professional evaluation, the professional development evaluation, if you would complete that. But we would like to thank our speakers, Chris Wyant, Philip Lee, and Kim Bazinski, and Jeri Fleming and Jacklyn for their presentations. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And a very, very special thanks to our sponsor, the CHS Foundation. CHS, if you visit the National Ag in the Classroom site, you just missed you just missed applying for the CHS scholarship, but CHS, in addition to help sponsor this professional development, they'll be sending a number of teachers to the National Ag in the Classroom program coming up in June in Orlando, Florida. They provide that. They also provide grants to school teachers at the local level. Those are always announced in the late summer and due in the fall. So we have a number of teachers across the nation that are presenting and are presenting materials based off of CHS grants that they've got. So we're very excited to have CHS as a sponsor of the National Ag in the Classroom program. With that, again, thank you. Keep an eye on your email for an evaluation. We welcome your input, and also keep an eye on our website, agintheclassroom.org, and our social media channels for upcoming events. With that, thank you for joining us. We wish you a great rest of the 22-23 school year, and we hope to see a number of you coming to us live in Orlando, Florida later in June. Thank you again, and we appreciate it so much.